Sam and Bucky, Bucky and Sam. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel at Asha Media TV. My name is Asha and this is where I like to watch and review a variety of sci-fi / fantasy / comic books related stuff. In this video, I'm going to be summarizing with my own style and reviewing the second episode titled Star-Spangled Man from the hit series from Marvel Studios, The Falcon and Winter Soldier. But before I do that, spoiler warning right now, coming up. If you haven't noticed, this is a spoiler review. I will be discussing details of this episode as well as touch on some aspects of episode 1. So if you haven't watched it, don't watch this video either. And second, if you did watch my previous reaction and review video of episode 1 and you're asking yourself, well, where's the reaction for episode 2? Unfortunately, I will no longer be uploading reactions to these episodes on YouTube. And if you want to know how to get access to my reactions, click on the link to watch this video above or go into the description box and click on the link regarding my news update about my channel, and everything you need to know about some changes to my channel are all explained in that video. And lastly, before I go on summarizing this episode with my particular style and reviewing the details of this episode, I need you to be aware of my Normie disclaimer. So as you see there on the screen, that's what I call my Normie disclaimer, and it's pretty much just letting you know that I am not a Marvel comic book reader. I'm not familiar with the source material related to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier or any comic book character, what thereof in the MCU or in the Marvel comics, okay? I only pay attention to the mainstream properties on TV and in the movies. And so if I get something wrong or I misinterpret something or I'm just completely off with my assumptions of what I interpreted in the episode itself, be easy on me in the comments, use some proper language and some manners if you want to kind of educate me on aspects of the source material related to these characters and the context of this episode, okay? I'm just being clear about that so that there's no misunderstanding between a non-expert normie and an expert comic book reader such as yourself probably watching this video. Who knows? All right, folks, let's now get started with my summary of this episode using some images that I've made, and then I'll cap things off with my review. This episode opens up with us being introduced to John Walker in a high school locker room where he seems to be reminiscing his days as a football player when his beautiful wife Olivia walks in to offer him emotional support. After Olivia leaves, we meet Lamar Hoskins, who has no trouble keeping it real with John about his obligations as Captain America. Shortly after Hoskins gives John his pep talk, we follow the lights, camera, and actions on the high school football field, where there's a massive celebration of John as America's new Captain America being recorded live on Good Morning America. Wow, that was a lot of America. In this exclusive interview with the new Captain America, we actually learn that John is an exemplary soldier. He's a real American hero. He's been awarded a whole bucket load of medals, including the Medal of Honor 3 freaking times. But despite all this glitz and glamour, we see that Bucky is none too pleased with this announcement of the new Captain America. In fact, this scene not only shows Bucky's anger, but also that he's a serious minimalist. I mean, gosh, would it hurt him to buy a chair to go with that single desk in the background there? Don't get me wrong, I'm quite impressed he's actually watching the interview on TV and not on the radio. But damn, Bucky, you can get yourself at least a couch. If you look to the left towards the floor, dude has his jacket on the floor, people. Oh man, Bucky, Bucky, Bucky. It's gonna take one piece of furniture at a time to work with Bucky. Of course, aside from Bucky, Sam himself is annoyed with this new Captain America, as he's constantly being reminded of that with these flashy Cap is Back posters everywhere around him. Which kind of reminded me of a very famous song called Without Me from Slim Shady. Y'all remember that song? Guess who's back, right? Back again. Shady's back. Tell a friend. I can't even sing it close to the song because, YouTube doesn't like that stuff. But coincidentally, Anthony Mackie played a meanie in 8 Mile, starring our very own Slim Shady himself. Could this be an Easter egg? Who knows? We then see that this whole kerfuffle with the new Captain America makes Bucky so mad, he finally goes to see Sam and confronts him about it. And that's where we get the hilarious Big 3 scene. If you haven't watched my reaction to the trailer to that, check it out. The link is in this video and in the description box. After Bucky vents out his anger about Sam not taking up the shield himself that Steve gave him, Sam then gives Bucky the 411 about the badly named terrorist group. Do you remember them? The Flag Smashers that are causing havoc in Eastern Europe with their superhuman strength and all kinds of craziness. This gets Bucky's attention, and he volunteers to tag along with Sam to help him stop these supposed terrorists. After some hilarious banter in an airplane and a really bad, embarrassing, non-parachute related landing from Bucky, we then come across our duo in somewhat of a warehouse where they're actually seeing these criminals actively steal mysterious cargo. Bucky's like, let's start shooting and then we'll ask questions later. Sam's like, no, let's do it the smart way so we don't die. Bucky eventually busts his way into one of the transport trucks and takes note of the surprising fact that this group is actually stealing medicine and vaccines. And what he believed to be a hostage situation going on inside the truck ends up being a beautiful redhead who's all smiles for like 2 seconds until she whoops his ass and kicks him out of the truck, revealing her to be a super soldier and part of the Flag Smashers. These baddies start kicking Bucky's butt and gaining traction on Sam despite his smooth Falcon moves. But before we can start shedding any tears for Sam and Bucky, the new Captain America and Hoskins come to the rescue and pretty much saves their asses. Then, after reluctantly hitching a ride from John Walker and Hoskins, John decides to use the opportunity to convince Sam and Bucky to join their team to stop the Flag Smashers. Bucky's like, no thank you. And Sam's like, well, maybe. Until John insultingly asks Sam to be his wingman, and that was enough for Sam to go, hell no, go F yourself, peace out. We're then brought back to our somewhat charitable terrorist group, where they're being hosted by a local fan that views them not as a terrorist group, but as their freedom fighters. Throughout the scene, we note a mantra that this group take very seriously, and that's the mantra of one world, one people. They keep repeating this over and over again, making you wonder, are they actually doing good, but unfortunately using violent means, henceforth being labeled as terrorists? Simple scene, speaks volumes on so many levels. Bucky then realizes he needs to introduce Sam to someone that's very important that can give them clues or answers to how to deal with this new super soldier terrorist group. So they head off to Baltimore, Maryland, and on their way to this person's house, a kid recognizes Sam and yells out, "Hey, Black Falcon!" And Sam says, "Just Falcon, kid." And the kid's like, no, my dad says it's Black Falcon. And Sam's like, is it because I'm black and the Falcon? And the kid's like, well, kinda, yeah. And Sam then turns to him and says, so are you like Black Kid? I love this scene so much, which I'm going to talk about a little later in my review. So let's move on, people. And then we come to one of the most powerful scenes in the whole episode, and that is the introduction of Isaiah. Isaiah, as we find out, was a black super soldier that no one knew about, not even Steve Rogers. And this black super soldier was actually commissioned by the American government to track down and hunt Bucky, and to which he did succeed at doing that, and he even kicked his ass, apparently. However, instead of being treated like a hero the way Steve was, he was actually imprisoned for 30 years and experimented on and messed around with who he calls Bucky's people, which is actually Hydra. Isaiah is upset and appalled that Bucky would even come to him after everything he's been through, and so he kicks them out of their house and Sam is furious with Bucky for never having told him about the existence of Isaiah. And while Sam is angrily questioning Bucky, they get stopped by the police in what I believe to be one of the most perfectly crafted scenes that touches on one of today's real-world social problem afflicting primarily the United States, and done in a very clever way that speaks more on the issue of classism than it does on racism. Again, I'll touch on that in more detail later on in my review, but in this scene, the cops basically tell Bucky that there is a warrant for his arrest because he missed therapy. Essentially, yeah, he missed therapy and he's being arrested for it. Which then leads us to the funniest scene in the whole episode. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen it in the trailers, and that is the therapy session between Bucky and Sam. This scene starts off with some hilarious banter between the two. However, it ends off with a very powerful admission from Bucky where he pretty much tells Sam that he's angry at him because Steve gave him the responsibility to be the next Captain America. He gave him the shield out of trust and out of faith that he was the right person to be the next Captain America, and that his refusal of picking up the mantle basically makes it seem as if Steve was wrong in choosing him. And thus, if Steve was wrong in choosing him, then likely Steve could have been wrong in believing that Bucky was a good person and that Bucky can be redeemed. And so the cool thing out of this is Bucky finally opens up about what's been griping him this whole time. So essentially, that ends up being the real breakthrough for Bucky and his therapist in that session. However, Sam makes it clear that his refusal of the mantle had nothing to do with disrespecting Steve and his legacy. It had simply to do with him feeling that he was making the right decision and that Bucky needs to understand and respect that. After being let out of jail, no thanks to John Walker bailing him out, John and Lamar try once again to convince Sam and Bucky to join their team. And Sam cuts through all the tension between Bucky and John by simply making it clear that they both cannot work together simply because they both can't approach the situation the same way. John and Lamar, they have to follow rules of engagement, whereas Bucky and Sam are free agents and they have more flexibility in their approach. And that leads to John making it very clear, okay, well, if that's the case, stay out of my way or else. And this is our first hint of somewhat of a dark side to John that we actually see based on this actor's performance. We now come back to our flag smashers in Slovakia, where they're super organized and getting things packed on quickly onto an airplane so they can continue their charitable donations of vaccines and medicines to another part of the world that needs them. However, the authorities have caught on to where they are and they're on their way, and Matthias is like, don't worry people, you do your thing, I will go and create a diversion. But Carly knows that that diversion will likely lead to him sacrificing himself so that they can get out safely. Which leads to us watching poor Matthias get riddled with bullets, when really he probably could have created just a bunch of diversions and get out of the way and use his super speed and super strength to escape the situation himself. But I guess for this circumstance, dying for the actual cause creates more drama and makes the impact of his sacrifice all the more sad for poor Carly, who has to watch it happen. As we come close to the end of this episode, Bucky and Sam are pretty much sure that agents of Hydra are actually responsible for giving out the super soldier serum to people they shouldn't be giving it to. And Bucky realizes that there's only one person that they can turn to find out what Hydra's up to, because this particular person, if you remember from Captain America Civil War, is an expert in Hydra affairs, and that person is none other than, wait for it people, yes, Zemo. Probably the most boring villain ever. My opinion, personally. So yes, we end off this episode with Zemo in prison and us now knowing that Bucky and Sam are going to talk to Zemo and likely partner with him in some form or another to find out what Hydra is up to and what they're doing with the Flag Smashers group. So there you have it, folks. That is my summary of this episode. So what I want to do now is kind of touch on some things that I didn't really like about it and end off with a positive bang with the stuff that I actually really loved about this episode. Thankfully, there isn't a lot that I didn't like about this episode. The two things that I actually didn't like about it are like me just being super nitpicky, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's just me really digging. If I had to dig for two things that I was like, I wish they did it differently. So let's start with number one, and that is Isaiah. As powerful as that scene with Isaiah was, what I wish they had actually done is show somewhat of a flashback of Isaiah as a young, powerful, dangerous assassin who was after Bucky, because in the scene, he actually makes it quite clear that he whooped Bucky's ass and that Hydra feared him. And so we've seen Bucky when he goes all Winter Soldier, right? Remember Captain America Civil War? And he was scary as F. So imagine someone twice as scary as the Winter Soldier whooping the Winter Soldier's ass. I would have loved to have seen some kind of flashback scene to show that. Now, presuming that Isaiah's kind of out in the open, Sam knows about him, I can only hope that this is not the last of Isaiah that we'll see, and we actually might get those flashbacks in future episodes. So here's crossing my fingers on that. And the second thing that I was just kind of like, they could have done that better. And that's the ending with the reveal of Zemo. It actually would have been a more suspenseful ending if Bucky's like, Sam, I know who we need to talk to, and you're not gonna like it, and it's someone that, you least expect. Dum dum dum, you know what I mean? Because in the trailers, Zemo is shown, and we're led to believe that he's likely gonna be a villain in the show. So by doing it that way, and then episode 3 comes around, and then it's revealed in a surprise, voila, it's actually Zemo they've gone to consult with to find out more about Hydra's activities. I just feel it would have been a better cliffhanger at the end of the scene and a really delightful surprise in episode 3 that allows us as viewers to go, oh my gosh, Zemo is an ally now, he's not actually the villain. Something along those lines. And that's pretty much the things that I really didn't like about this episode. So that means there are a ton of other stuff that I loved about this episode, but I'm only going to focus on my top 3. Otherwise, this is going to be a really long ass video. Okay, so number one thing that I absolutely loved about this episode, and I don't think I'm alone on this, I think a majority of you will agree, and that is the therapy session moment between Bucky and Sam. That was not only hilarious, and it seems to be a bit improvised as well between the actors, but also it was very revealing of what Bucky really thought and felt about Sam's refusal to take up the mantle as Captain America. And I loved how Sam's reply was very simple and straightforward and kind of it seemed like it made Bucky feel a little bit bad, because it was one of those situations where it was like Bucky thought it was all about him, but really Sam's like, dude, that was my decision. I felt it was the right thing to do. Have you ever thought of that? And I love that moment. I thought it was very powerful and very well done, and it didn't draw itself out unnecessarily in dramatics that we really didn't need to see. The next best thing that I love is how they actually introduced us to the character of John Walker as the next new Captain America. In the first scene, we're introduced to him on a very intimate level with his wife, where we are seeing John Walker, the man, the husband, the lover. And then we see him as the colleague to Hoskins and the dutiful soldier to his country. And so those layers of his personality and of his life are shown on display right away to us as our first impressions of John Walker. And then later on in the show, you start to see more hints of his personality based on who he's talking to and the environment he's in. So by the time we see John interacting with Sam and Bucky especially, right? I mean, you can cut that tension with some knives and then some, okay? And we see the darker side of John start to creep out as he realizes he's not going to get what he wants, because he seems like the kind of guy that is used to getting things the way he wants them, or more or less he's used to things working out the way he expects them to be. And then when you have Sam and Bucky where they're like, no thanks, we don't want to be part of your team, and Sam gives a very perfect diplomatic answer that's actually truthful, he's a free agent, they're not, and they can't mix well, that, makes perfect sense. But it also puts John's defenses up, where he makes it quite clear in a very menacing way to Sam, okay, you're a free agent, go do your thing, but don't get in my way. And the performance from Mr. Russell is perfect in that moment. And pay attention to Hoskins' face too as John makes that threat. I think it's fair to assume, based on their experiences together in a variety of classified type cases, that Hoskins is very much aware that John is not someone you want to trifle with. And the last thing I absolutely love that this episode did, and I feel it is the model. It is the model that I believe a lot of these mainstream TV shows need to follow. If you've watched my previous videos, I have mentioned quite redundantly, that when it comes to making social commentary about real world crises or dilemmas, related to politics, of the nature, related to divisive or divisive type subject matters, when it comes to trying to touch on that using TV shows, especially fictional comic book related properties, I feel that it's best received in sprinkles, I call it, right? Sprinkles. Like, for example, if you want to touch on a subject related to feminism, instead of being so overt about it and pushy about it to the audience, like me, be clever about it and original about it, and touch on it in little spurts here and there where it's relevant and within the context of the story. And in this episode, they managed to execute their social commentary in a sprinkled fashion in probably one of the best ways I've ever seen, to be honest, especially based on the subject matter. So let me touch on the first one that they did that I thought was very clever, and it was very quick. And if you don't know any better, I don't even think you realize really what was really being said under the text kind of thing. And that's the scene I mentioned in my summary, where Sam and Bucky arrive in Baltimore, and a young black boy turns to Sam and he's like, hey, it's Black Falcon. And Sam is like, it's just Falcon, right? And then he's like, no, my dad told me that it's Black Falcon. And so Sam's like, is it because I'm black and I'm the Falcon? And the kid's like, well, yeah. And Sam's like, well, then are you Black Kid? And the kid realizes kind of how silly the whole notion of labeling it as black in order to make it authentically black. That's how I interpret that. Either way, I like what they were saying to us, or what I perceive or interpret, because everybody's going to probably interpret that scene differently. I interpret it as, you don't need to have the label of black for it to be authentic black. It's just a given. Anyway, I like how they executed it using humor and using the context of how this kid viewed him as Black Falcon, and how Sam kind of corrected him to help him understand that the emphasis on the black part isn't necessary. Know what I mean? And the next scene that I absolutely loved, and I felt it was brilliantly executed, not just in terms of performance by Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan, but also the entire cast of that scene. And that's the scene with the police officers. So before I even go into talking about this scene, I want to make two things clear. I'm Canadian and I live in Canada. I've spent my whole life in Canada. I do not have a direct connection to African Americans and their experience as African Americans in the United States. So it's from an observer point of view based on what the mainstream media has shown me. Okay, I just need you guys to know that, because I wouldn't know any better. I don't have, like I said, a direct experience, or I don't know of anyone in my own social circle that has dealt with that real world issue that the United States have with police and police brutality and racism. Okay, just need that to be clear so you understand where I'm coming from here. All right, so with that being said and being clear, I loved how they used the context of what was going on in the scene to touch on the subject of police and racism on a superficial level. But if you are like me and you like to kind of really analyze things, I rewinded that scene 4 times and I noticed it wasn't necessarily about race. It was actually about class, because if you go back to that scene, the police officer immediately prejudges that Sam is, I don't know, a hooligan or whatever, bothering Bucky. And so it's natural that your knee-jerk reaction is, oh my gosh, that's a racist, white cop. But notice 2 things. Number 1, as soon as he realizes that Sam is actually, the Falcon, he's a celebrity, he's in a different class, social class, his demeanor completely changes. All the other officers are like, oh, sorry, okay? And take note of a second thing that leads me to believe that the focus was not really about racism, but it was about classism. And that is the background, the characters that played the onlookers, okay? They weren't just all black people. They were black and white people in a poor neighborhood. Why I think it's so important to note how clever that was done is that it's so easy for us to blanket classism with racism. Now, I want to make it clear that this channel is not about having social commentary debates about politics and social problems or anything of the kind. That's not the purpose of this channel. So if you're going to start lecturing me about that stuff in the comments, I will be ignoring that, possibly deleting and blocking people if you get too aggressive on that. What I'm trying to bring to light with this particular scene is that the producers and the writers chose a very sensitive topic that's affecting African Americans in the United States as we speak, and they're able to make a commentary about it using this context of Sam and Bucky walking in Baltimore in a poor neighborhood that likely has a lot of police surveillance, and what that could be like with those characters at that time. It's relevant, and it's not overtly in your face for more than 2 minutes. And then it becomes about Bucky and Sam and their conversation about, why didn't Bucky tell Sam about Isaiah and all that stuff. Okay, so go back and watch that scene and pay attention again, like I said, to the background characters. That makes it quite clear that the commentary is about the class issue and how the class issue likely, of course, has its roots with race, but in the context of this moment, in that story, it had to do with the social status of Sam being the Falcon, which saved him from scrutiny and prejudice from these police officers. Of course, I have to be very careful with how I word things when it comes to these subjects, especially here on YouTube. So there you have it, folks. That's my overall review of this episode. I've named off a couple of stuff I didn't like. I've given you 3 core things that I really enjoyed that they did with this episode. And I can't wait for episode 3 when we see more of Zemo and what he's going to be adding to the team. I think it's going to be a really interesting dynamic having this whole trio of Zemo, Sam, and Bucky, because Sam and Bucky as a duo is so much fun. So imagine Zemo and his kind of like stoic, I don't know how to describe Zemo. Like he's very stoic and he's kind of mopey a little bit, very calm and I don't know. I'm terrible at impersonating stuff, but it's going to be a really fun dynamic to see between the 3 of them. If what I presume will actually happen, which is that he's going to be somewhat of the third wheel tagging along to help them figure out this whole Hydra mystery with the Flag Smashers group. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments, subscribe, click on the notification bell so you get alerted for more of my videos coming up. And if you are a subscriber, as I said at the beginning of this video, there are changes being made to my channel specifically on April 1st. So look out for a video to which I'll be posting a very specific video about what's going to be happening with my reactions versus my review videos and my plans with that. All right, so if you're interested in knowing more about that, just wait till April 1st. I'll have that posted for you. And if you're new to my channel and you're like, hey, I think you're cool, Asha, and I want to watch more of your reviews on YouTube, you know what to do. You know what to do. It's there on the screen for you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Asha, peacing out. Bye, people. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos and subscribe. You know you wanna.